Hello everybody. Very often I am asked what is my favourite car ever, or that I've driven, and I really should have an answer for that question. But the simple fact is, I don't. What I'll often say to people is the Jaguar XJ220, for two reasons. Number one, it was genuinely a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And number two, I tend to rely on the fact that the people I'm speaking with probably haven't driven an XJ220, so they can't argue with me about it too much. However, if you were to ask me what's the best kind of car in the world, not my favourite, that's much easier to answer because, let's be honest, it's this, isn't it? The best kind of car in the world is a Lexus LS. It's not a Ferrari 550, it's not a Honda NSX, it's not a Range Rover Sport, it's this. Now, it doesn't specifically mean this exact car, although in about 20 minutes' time I'll have a much better idea. I mean this breed of car, the big flagship luxury saloon. Because you see, these are the kind of cars where all the compromises usually involved in making anything else just stop. This is the kind of car where nobody says, hang on a moment, we can't put automatic windows on all four corners, it's too expensive, or there's a model above and we've got to leave something for that. This is the car where whatever company making it says, yes, this is a statement about how good our cars can possibly be. And if you've yet to experience something like this, only a few hundred yards behind the wheel and you will hopefully get exactly what this is all about. I love doing reviews on these kinds of cars for a few reasons. First off, actually, they tend to get quite good views. Secondly, it's the most relaxing thing in the world to drive. We're filming on a Sunday morning, and there's a whole bunch of people knobbing around the countryside in supercars at the moment. If I was trying to review something remotely sporty, I'd be very frustrated right about now. I'd be worried that someone would confuse me with the hooligans trying to make a lot of noise. I'd also worry about encountering traffic because I do want to be able to test the dynamics of a car nicely and properly to tell you all what it's like. I get very frustrated when I watch car reviews on YouTube and I see that someone's only driven the thing up and down a dual carriageway a few times. That's not a test of a sports car, not in the least. You want an interesting road with bends and all sorts of complicated camber to really see what a car's actually like. I feel very bad if I drive a car and at the end of it I don't really feel like I have a sensation of what it's truly like. But with a car like this, every single moment you're sat in it, not necessarily even behind the wheel, you are getting what it's absolutely best at. Something like a Caterham really only comes alive when you're thrashing the pants off of it or enjoying it on a track. But something like this, well, it just is always fabulous. So let's talk a little bit more about this precise car. Well, it's a 2010 Lexus LS600h, part of what they call the XF40 generation that was in production from pretty much the tail end of 2006 up until roughly 2017. There were two choices of engine available for this car, both V8s. You could have either the regular plain old 4.6 litre V8 combined with an automatic gearbox and then a choice of rear or all-wheel drive, but I don't think in all markets, or you could have this, the daddy, the 600h. This is a hybrid. In fact, we're currently waiting behind some horses and we're doing so in total silence because the engine in here isn't running. Now, you might expect with the regular car having a 4.6 litre V8 that the hybrid one obviously would have something a little bit smaller, turbocharged V6 perhaps. Well, that's what the later and current LS600h has, but this one instead has a 5 litre V8 and a hybrid system. Now, all told, this car puts out 440 horsepower, although, as is tradition with these things, if you were to add the outputs of both the petrol combustion engine and the electric motors, it would actually come to a much higher total. In fact, this car has a lot more hybrid in it than I thought. Over 200 horsepower up the front. That's really quite impressive. I don't know exactly how much the petrol engine makes, but I expect it's probably sort of similar to what the 4.6 actually puts out, so mid 300s. A lot of cars on this channel I say I've been wanting to review for quite some time, and there'll be different reasons for that. This certainly fits the bill, but the particular reason I've been so keen to try one of these is that I do rather want to buy one. I have had a couple of barge-tastic cars in the recent past. Mercedes S500L from 1999 and a 2007 BMW 760Li. Unfortunately, both of those cars were nothing but trouble. Yet I still loved both of them. The 7 Series in particular, currently owned by my friend and fellow YouTuber It's Joel, was just magnificent. It was just a majestic, wondrous car to be in many ways superior to this. Certainly the quality of leather and the quantity of it seemed a little bit better, but here in this generation, Lexus seemed to be pretty darn close to their German rivals. So close, in fact, I would say that it doesn't actually matter. And it's special in its own way, of course. There are little pieces about it that I just utterly adore. The way that this opens up, it's just magnificent. Just the feel of the mechanism is so buttery smooth. For something that's 11 years old, it's just wondrous. And I know it's going to sound absolutely mad, but I opened the bonnet to get some shots. A bit of a waste of time, to be honest, because as you'll see, there's nothing to see up there. But the lever to release that bonnet felt like it was brand spanking new. Just the perfect amount of resistance. You knew exactly what was going on. It just, these little things you don't expect, and it's those kind of things that show you that this is a car that they've engineered to be as good as it can be. And when the combined might of Toyota decides to make a car as good as it can be, they wind up with something rather special. This car in particular actually has a very nice specification. The earlier LS that I drove, which was available in 4.3 litre guise only, so the LS430, that had only one body style and one shape, one size. There was no long wheelbase version. With this car there is. Now I'm not so sure about the UK market, but most of the 600s that I see here are the long wheelbase version. This one's gone one step further, and it has the 4-seat option. So in the rear, between your 2 seats, you have this nice big console which has a little picnic table on it, and again, the mechanism, oh, buttery smooth. It's just mechanical pornography, honestly. And you've got, of course, plenty of this beautiful light leather, this sort of matte effect wood, which is quite nice. Ceilings, not quite as spectacular as in the 7 Series, but still really rather lovely. Little wooden grab handles here, again, same as the Beamer. The whole thing's just full of little details, and I'm quite confident that in the time I have this car today, I'm not going to come even close to finding all of them. You have a Mark Levinson Hi-Fi in here, which I've not really had much time to test, but generally speaking, the Mark Levinsons are quite good. I believe it's a hard drive powered system as well. You've got 4-zone climate control, heated and cooled seats up front, heated steering wheel. You've got electrically adjustable seats in the back as well. They go all over the place. You can actually remove the passenger seat over here entirely. There's a DVD player in the back. You've got massage functions too. In fact, in the rear cubbyhole, you'll find remotes for both the DVD player and the massage function, so there's a lot more than just the on and off that you got in the Beamer. The display here is nice and simple, beautifully so. On the right, we've got our power and charge for our hybrid. You've got your fuel. In the middle, you've just got this gigantic speedo, and tucked away neatly off to the left is your Rev Counter, which I haven't really seen move all that much. Down here, we have a number of buttons that adjust different things. You have one for raising the air suspension, which I think is an essential to have in any car that does have air ride. You've then got powertrain and suspension mode, so you've got sport, comfy, normal for pretty much both of them, and I've currently got them set in normal. In the interest of science, I am going to set both into power mode now and set the gearbox into sport, and we'll see what she's like when you try and press on. Now, one of the things that's always put me off buying one of these particular cars, in fact, no, let's be honest here. The one thing that's put me off buying a car like this is the gearbox. The regular petrol-powered short wheelbase cars get an 8-speed automatic, which is an excellent gearbox. This has a CVT, which means that it just sounds a little bit weird because the CVT gearbox allows the engine to go to whatever revs essentially it wants. So you put your foot down and it just goes, you don't get that lovely working through the rev range that you might expect. And in fact, it's just annoying me. So everything's going to go back into normal mode, get the gearbox back into regular mode. I mean, like, there's actually up and down buttons here as well for the gearbox, which is just odd. Let's be plainly honest about this. Not really a car for hustling. BMW, certainly better, more enjoyable. This, I'd say similar in speed. 440 horses it may have, but this is also one of the heaviest cars I've ever tested. Official weight figures, something like sort of 2.3 tons. Real world, with options and things on it, about 2.5. This is a big old bus. However, the hybrid system is actually useful here because not only does it mean you can move around silently at many a speed, but you also get actual, real, practical fuel economy. You do. You really do. This really is supremely comfortable. I would say superior to the 7 Series and my S-Class, and yeah, the only thing that comes even vaguely close to this would be the Audi S8 that I drove, which had all of the sort of adaptive, road sensing gubbins with an active suspension on it. That's the only thing that's come even remotely close to this. Otherwise, it's wondrous. The Nissan President that I drove actually did have also a very, very soft ride, but nowhere near the control this did. The Nissan President was just like unreasonably like old 1950s American car soft. That wasn't very enjoyable. This one you can certainly make progress in, and it's fine. There's no issues with it. It's actually a real joy to drive. Visibility is actually not that bad for something this big. You've got a reversing camera, which is nice. Parking sensors all round, they're fairly necessary. And there's some odd little touches too, like there's a little grey box above the steering wheel, and apparently that's looking at me. And if I don't pay too much attention to the road, if I'm looking elsewhere for too long, it will flash and beep at me and tell me to look where I'm going, you damn it. The thing is, unsurprisingly, enormous. Driving this around certain little British towns like the one that I live in would be a little bit tricky because I'm not sure there's actually a parking space you could fit this in. But then that hasn't stopped people from buying SUVs en masse. No, not at all. Now, is this a car without fault? No, certainly isn't. Like I said, the gearbox would get on my wick. I can also tell that something's up with the car when I'm braking. Now, 2 possibilities for that. One would be the brakes themselves, but I think probably more likely this car just needs some new bushes in it. All cars of this size do tend to chew through their bushes at a fair rate. There is a YouTube channel, I think Swiss Car Guy was his name, and I actually watched his review where he looked at all of his costs of working on this car, and some bits on these very expensive, especially when it comes to things that are unique to the 600h or the LS in general. So do be aware that if things do break or do wear, then yeah, it's not going to be the cheapest. But this being a Lexus, whilst you will have to, of course, deal with maintenance, there's nothing really they can do to stop bushes wearing out and all that kind of jazz happening. But in terms of stuff actually breaking, I suspect you're going to be okay. And here's where we come in for the killer blow. This is why I love cars like this so very much. And here's why I think the Lexus in particular could be the finest thing out there today. Most people, I think it's fair to say, don't really care how a car drives, or they simply don't know what a decent driving car actually feels like. One of the two. It doesn't really matter which, does it? But I would say people in general do care about the luxury features a car has. How comfortable is it? How nice are the seats? How economical is it? And in that regard, by the way, this does impress. It can actually achieve over 32 the gallon, so much better than my 7 Series. They want to know how easy it is to drive around in, what safety features it has, all that kind of stuff. And here, that car scores very highly. Having that little distant V8 rumble on occasion is quite nice, even if it does great after a little bit, but that's a minor criticism. The car's got no issue getting up to speed, and I don't really know of many circumstances where this couldn't do absolutely everything that you need. The only real other shortcoming of it is in terms of space. In here, of course, no problem, but the boot, common you'll find with S-Class 7 Series, just isn't the biggest. In fact, most estate cars will happily dwarf it, as will a big SUV. So if you really do need to carry around 5 people and a lot of stuff all the time, you regularly go and pick up old tables and things like that, this is not the car for you. But for everybody else that doesn't, this is brilliant. It's so well suited to what you need, and here's what I was leading up to: price. You can pick up an example of an LS600h for about 10,000 quid. Now, there is a few of them to choose from. They did some fairly major upgrades to the car in 2009, and that's the generation that this is. They then changed it quite dramatically again in 2012, and it looked like a completely different car from the front. It had the more modern sort of Lexus grille design. And then in 2017, it finally got replaced with the current version. This, a lot of people seem to consider to be one of the more desirable variants because it doesn't have the little trackpad that later ones got, and it still has the V8 engine in it, of course, and it does more or less what you want. And I've seen the most expensive example of a car of this era up for about 20,000 quid. That's not a lot of money. The temptation, if you are the sort of person considering one of these, the temptation is always going to be to go and get probably an even faster car from the Germans. Go and get a Merc S65 AMG or something like that. But you get one of those, and I think you are setting yourself up for a world of hurt with that. That's just my opinion on the matter. The Lexus, I feel, is just going to be a somewhat safer bet. I get this feeling of the depth of engineering in these cars being much more comprehensive than what the Germans offer. And much, I'll be honest, as with my LS430 review, sat where I am, I'm kind of struggling to see what it is that the Germans offer that this doesn't. Now, the man who brought me this car, Vaz, is clearly a man with eclectic taste. He's just purchased a couple of cars that hopefully will make their way onto the channel very soon. I'm not going to spoil what those are. But he's also the gentleman who brought me the Maserati Quattroporte Sport GTS that I reviewed fairly recently. Now, that's also a car that is very tempting, but I've had a few conversations with my Maserati specialist, and it turns out he doesn't really like me that much. So the Quattroporte is going to be one of those cars that, for me, stays in that dream about it car list. But the LS600h, I would have one. I really would. In some ways, it will be a brilliant replacement for my 1 Series. In other ways, of course, utterly terrible. I occasionally have to do a big, long journey up to Scotland, which is a 460 mile in one go kind of thing. And as I try and stop as little as often at the moment, this is precisely the car that I want to take. In truth, this is a car where its owner managed to sum it up far better than I think I ever could. So I'm simply going to repeat what he told me this morning. He has 2 young girls, and not once has he ever been asked when driving this car, are we there yet? I can't think of any better way to sum up the LS600h. Buy one, be prepared to spend on it because things will need doing. It's not an unbreakable car, but if you're going to keep it long term, I think this is a car that really will reward you, certainly in terms of ease of use and maintenance, over the German equivalent. And here in the UK, this is also a very rare car. A 7 Series or S-Class you're going to find on every street corner in certain parts of London. But this is doing things a little bit differently. And I rather like it. To the extent that I could actually just forgive the CVT gearbox. It even turns nicely when you're in a bend and you pick up a little bit of speed like that. It's a Brucey bonus, but that's not what you're here for, is it? You want a Lexus that does that, go and buy an LC500. Also an amazing car. So, there we have it. That's a brief little look at a somewhat forgotten luxury limo. Thanks all for watching. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all for the next one. Bye-bye.